Born nearly 31 years before the Battle of Yavin, Ahsoka Tano was the most gifted and powerful student of her generation. Her strong connection to the Force was discovered by Jedi Master Plo Koon, and she was brought to the temple at a young age. Ahsoka would quickly prove herself as useful and headstrong, but with a good heart. Unfortunately for Tano, she was born just in time for the Clone Wars, and would be forged in the fires it wrought. Ahsoka Tano would be assigned by Master Yoda himself to learn from one of the greatest Jedi of her era, Anakin Skywalker. She was assigned so early partly due to recognition for extraordinary skills, and partially, though this was unfair to Tano, to help alleviate some of Skywalker's issues with attachment. Ahsoka would serve alongside her master with distinction throughout the Clone Wars, and together they would earn a reputation for the unorthodox nature of their partnership. Unlike her master, however, Tano would not begin to lose herself in the war, and would always keep her Jedi serenity on hand to calmly deal with any situation. Despite her unwavering dedication to the Jedi Order, she would leave the Jedi after being falsely accused, tried, and acquitted of crimes perpetrated by the Jedi Padawan Barriss Offee. This would end up saving her life, as her extra-legal status allowed her to be isolated on a Venator-class Star Destroyer when Order 66 came. Escaping with the aid of Clone Commander Rex, they would fake their deaths and part ways. During this time, Ahsoka would continue to grow her skills and craft a new pair of lightsabers. Ahsoka would finally face off against her old master years later on the planet of Malachor, waging a titanic lightsaber duel throughout the Sith Temple. Ahsoka would stay behind to stall Vader long enough to allow her allies time to flee the battle. Born during the height of the Yuuzhan Vong War, Ben Skywalker was the son of Grand Master Luke Skywalker and Jedi Master Mara Jade. Sheltered in the Maw black hole cluster during the war with other younglings, Ben was contacted by the Force entity known as Abeloth, who was attempting to infect the minds of the young Jedi sheltering there. The infant Ben would reflexively cut himself off from the Force to protect himself from Abeloth's probings, and this mentality would continue well into his childhood. As a young boy, Ben would be reintroduced to his cousin Jacen Solo, who had returned from a 5-year sojourn that consisted of learning arcane uses of the Force from obscure mystic orders across the galaxy. Ben would learn to open up to the Force through Jacen, becoming extremely attached to his cousin to the point of idolization. This idolization would prove to be a liability when Jacen Solo turned to the dark side, becoming the Sith Lord known as Darth Caedus. Caedus, along with his Sith master, the Dark Lady Lumaya, would instigate the events that would lead to the Second Galactic Civil War. Becoming Caedus' unwitting first Sith apprentice, Ben would slowly fall towards the dark side, attempting to arrest his uncle Han Solo and Aunt Leia Organa Solo, along with assassinating 2 heads of state at the bidding of Caedus. The apprenticeship would end with the murder of Mara Skywalker at the hands of Caedus, and while there was initial lack of evidence, Ben would be unwavering in his belief of Caedus being his mother's killer. Going through several trials and tribulations, Ben would be knighted at the age of only 14, and would then go on to be instrumental in ending the Second Galactic Civil War, accepting the surrender of Caedus' Sith apprentice Tahiri Vela, and ending the legacy of Darth Bane's rule of 2 permanently. Unfortunately, Bane's Sith were but one of 3 Sith sects active at the time, and Ben, along with his father, would come into contact with one of them, the Lost Tribe of the Sith. Marooned on a technologically inferior planet for the past 5,000 years, the Lost Tribe would make their move for galactic dominance roughly 2 years after Darth Caedus' death. Ben and his father would be the first Jedi to come into contact with the Lost Tribe, and together they would butcher all but one of the initial strike teams sent to assassinate them. The conflicts with the Lost Tribe would culminate with a final confrontation with Abeloth. The confrontation would take place in 3 places simultaneously, with Saba Sabayatine and Tahiri Vela in the Jedi Temple, Luke Skywalker and Darth Krayt in the netherworld of the Force, along with Ben Skywalker and Vestara Kai on Abeloth's home planet. All three strike teams would succeed, though not without heavy injuries to all parties. Ben would recover to full health, resuming his duties as a Jedi Knight. His final fate remains uncertain. Hello YouTube, this is the Phoenix Exalt bringing you the next installment of my Versus series. For this analysis, I will be using Ahsoka Tano during the time frame of Season 2 of Rebels, and Ben Skywalker from the time frame of the novel Crucible. For my analysis of Ben Skywalker, I will be pulling from solely Legends continuity, as he does not appear in canon material whatsoever. For Ahsoka Tano, I will be pulling from both the 2008 animated Clone Wars television show, along with her appearances in Season 2 of Rebels, along with any pertaining tie-in materials. I will not be taking into account her 2 duels against General Grievous. This is due to the fact that General Grievous is severely underpowered for the Clone Wars television show. In the original 2003 Clone Wars animated series, Grievous's introduction was him single-handedly beating 6 Jedi, 2 of whom were Council Masters, another 2 of whom were Masters. Additionally, his showings in subsequent novels and comic books only further enforced the idea that Grievous can only be matched by Council-level adepts. The Grievous showcase in TCW was outsmarted and bested by a small contingent of Gungans on one day, but would then duel 3 Council-level Masters the next. Due to his power level waxing and waning as the plot demands, I cannot draw conclusive evidence from his duels in TCW, and as such I will not be discussing them. I will be using Ahsoka's showings in the newly released Season 7 of the series, though I will avoid plot details to avoid spoilers. As for Ben Skywalker, the character has been often accused of having a skill level that scaled as the plot demanded, and with much of Ben's training being off-screen, or in this case off-page, the criticism is understandable. However, I will be proceeding with my analysis assuming that Ben has achieved the skill he has, along with the rank of Jedi Knight, through both training and his natural aptitude as the grandson of the Chosen One, not plot armor. Let us not forget that Ben has received training from both Jacen Solo and Luke Skywalker, 2 of the most powerful and skilled Force users in galactic history. I will also make the assumption that Ben has been actively working on his abilities outside of the combat scenarios he has been shown in. The novels have made no mention as for a reason why he would not be constantly training with both his lightsaber and his Force abilities, especially considering by the time of the novel Crucible, he was actively working to hunt down Sith, and therefore would have incentive to keep his dueling skills sharp. With that out of the way, I obviously own none of the characters, art, music, or other media depicted in this video, and all rights to them go to the respective companies. With that out of the way, I present to you Ahsoka Tano versus Ben Skywalker. If these 2 combatants met on the battlefield, who would be the victor? Native to the jungle world of Shilai, Togrutans were known for having superior strength, agility, and durability as compared to humans. Ahsoka Tano has a standard build for a Togruta female, standing at 6'1" by adulthood. Agility was her greatest asset and has been shown of multiple times during the Clone Wars. While she was unable to compete with the overwhelming might of Darth Vader in Rebels, she was capable of contending with stronger opponents as shown by her bout with her Trandoshan captors in Season 3 of TCW. The Grutons were further distinguished by having 2 hollow montrals protruding from their heads. These montrals were a tremendous asset when it came to personal combat, as they provided a form of passive echolocation. This gives Tano a heightened awareness during combat that projects a 360-degree view of her surroundings, allowing her to easily multitask between multiple opponents. Ahsoka has also taken several hits over the course of both TCW and Rebels, including glancing blaster bolts and electroshocks. but nothing has been shown that goes beyond the standard survivability of any Jedi, or for that matter, Togruta. Ben Skywalker is a human male of roughly 18 years of age. As noted by the Essential Guide to Alien Species, humans were the most populous species in the galaxy, an advanced race possessing highly evolved brains, and advanced hardiness, along with adaptability to sudden changes in environment. He was of roughly standard weight, build, and height. As mentioned previously, humans were renowned for their physical resilience, and Ben Skywalker's constitution is nothing short of extraordinary. At the age of 14, Ben was captured and tortured by his cousin Jacen Solo, then the Sith Lord Darth Caedus, using the Embrace of Pain, a torture method thought to be one of the worst in the galaxy and developed by the Yuuzhan Vong. Once Caedus' attention was diverted as he became engaged with Ben's father in a brutal lightsaber duel, Ben managed not only to free himself, but incapacitate Caedus with a vibroblade to the back shoulder. A few short months later, Ben would be captured again by Caedus' Sith apprentice Tahiri Vela, along with a squad of commandos who would capture him by repeatedly shooting him with blasters. These wounds would not be allowed to be fully healed, and Ben would be tortured for likely over a week straight by Caedus' personal torture droid. Despite this, once Ben was relieved from the hallucinogenic drugs in an effort to break him by other means, he was able to overpower both Tahiri Vela and the two commando guards while being deprived of a weapon and restrained by shackles. Just a few short days later, with limited medical attention, Ben would then wage another duel against Tahiri, though this time he would be victorious. At the age of 16, he would be subjected to a gauntlet of near constant combat with members of the Lost Tribe of the Sith, including Council Master level Sith along with the Force entity known as Abeloth. This would include multiple duels and battlefield scenarios for several weeks if not months, with limited medical attention available. Ben would emerge all the stronger for it, and like his father and grandfather before him, would rise to accept each and every new test head-on. It would not be going down without a fight. This conclusion is easy to call. While Ben's impressive resiliency is something to be commended, it merely puts him on par with Ahsoka and her natural-born traits. Their respective displays with acrobatics are roughly similar, and Ben could likely claim an advantage in strength, with Ahsoka having an advantage in speed. Additionally, Ben cannot compete with Ahsoka's natural echolocation, which allows her to passively keep track of her opponents while Ben has to actively keep track of them with his eyes or through the Force. At the end of the day, what seals the deal for Ahsoka is her natural-born traits that a human opponent simply cannot overcome on their own. Ahsoka Tano gets the edge for physical abilities. Though Ahsoka Tano was trained by the reigning master of Jem So, who himself was the student of the reigning master of Surisu, Ahsoka would adopt a form more in keeping with her agile physique and practice elements of both Form 4 Ataru and Form 5 Shien. Ahsoka would clearly embody the full usage of Ataru by using not only acrobatics but her whole body as a weapon, showcasing her prowess with unarmed martial arts on numerous occasions. Her application of Shien would be shown through the form's signature reverse grip, and her numerous showcasings of aim deflection along with a fighting style that would switch from the acrobatics of Ataru into the strength-oriented Form 5. Ahsoka's preference for dual wielding has bolstered all aspects of her chosen style, and the mere fact that she so seamlessly transitioned from 1 to 2 blades in the span of less than a year is a testament to her skill. However, as with most Jar-Kai duelists, her skills with a single saber have declined over time, and depriving her of one of her sabers is a sure method to begin facing a less capable Ahsoka. As a Padawan, Ahsoka's application of lightsaber combat was around a Tier 5, as she lacked the measured and focused approach showcased by an advanced combatant. However, by her duel with Vader, She had clearly advanced her practice to a Tier 4 application, and it is not hard to imagine that if Legends had continued, that it was likely that Ahsoka Tano would have eventually become one of the greatest swords beings of her era, joining up with Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Order as an instructor, much the same as Master Kakruk. That being said, by the time of her duel with Vader, Ahsoka Tano had been showcased in duels with Asajj Ventress, Barriss Offee, Darth Maul, the Inquisitors, and Vader himself. Ahsoka dueled with Maul and Ventress before her showcased prime in Rebels, when she was between the ages of 14 and 16. Her loss to Barriss at the tail end of Season 5 can be excused with the fact that she was missing her second weapon, and Ahsoka was suffering from a measure of exhaustion at the time. Ahsoka's victories against the two Inquisitors was a given, as they can be considered roughly Tier 6 opponents. Tano's loss against Vader was a foregone conclusion, but it should be noted that Ahsoka is to be commended for such a valiant effort against Vader, but I think it's fair to say that she only lasted as long as she did because Vader didn't want to kill her immediately, but rather recruit her. Once she established that she would neither join him nor flee, Vader overwhelmed her in short order and would have killed her if not for Dave Filoni's plot meddling. The last thing that must be discussed is Ahsoka Tano's reverse grip. As clearly shown by her fight with the Inquisitors, Ahsoka wields her lightsabers in a reverse grip, which inadvertently cripples her fighting style. The reason for this comes down to physics. Hold a pencil or other long, narrow object in standard grip, and move your wrist in all available ranges of motion. Then, hold the pencil in a reverse grip, and do the same. The reverse grip cripples the range of motion of a combatant, and therefore makes them predictable. This can be seen when the non-force sensitive Pre Vizsla manages to land a forward kick, disrupting Ahsoka's lightsaber sequences. Given time, it is likely that she would have given up this practice, and wielded her twin blades in the standard grip, and echoes of this future fighting form can be seen in her duel with Vader. But for now, she remains a practitioner of the grip, and is still subject to its weaknesses. Ben Skywalker's chosen form of lightsaber combat has never been confirmed in any source. However, due to the era that he lived in, an approximation of his style can be inferred. During the New Jedi Order, the three rings of defense along with personalized fighting styles were standard, and using the Fate of the Jedi book series description of Ben's fights as a basis, I conclude that Ben Skywalker used a dual application of Form 4 Ataru and Form 5 Jem So, hybridized with Forms 3 and 1. Ben would use elaborate flourishing swordplay, reinforced by force-assisted acrobatics and physical combat techniques to outmaneuver and overpower opponents. However, Ben did not shy away from using cleaving plower blows to literally bisect his opponents when necessary. Ben has also shown an ability to carve through multiple groups of armed opponents, and even though groups and members of the Lost Tribe of the Sith. Going against three dark side amped opponents and killing all of them in a fight single-handedly, Ben's dueling victories have been against opponents with greater experience, as all members of the Lost Tribe he faced were the equivalent of a Jedi Knight in rank, if not higher. And as detailed in Fate of the Jedi Omen, high-intensity sparring and even duels to the death were not uncommon for Lost Tribe Sith members, and since they were part of an invasion force, they were not newbies. While Ben's body count of Lost Tribe members is certainly impressive, it should be noted that most of his kills appear to be in the high tier 6 and low tier 5 combatants, and so it is not as though he was carving through Sith Lords like his father is capable of. Despite this, Ben is contended with, if not outright bested, high-level combatants that are part of the Lost Tribe, that are over twice his age. And the mere fact that he was one of 6 Jedi to survive the ambush in the Jedi Temple by the Lost Tribe is a testament to his skill. Ben's showings as a combatant and his clear ability to kill Tier 6 opponents and low Tier 5 opponents with relative ease, along with an ability to reliably defeat Tier 4 opponents, result in me placing Ben Skywalker at a likely low Tier 4 skill set when it came to lightsaber dueling. This is a difficult call, as both combatants have displayed similar showings, Both Ahsoka and Ben have little difficulty with Force-using opponents of lesser skill that are wielding diverse weapon sets. Additionally, both will typically lose engagement with opponents that are significantly stronger than them, though neither will be curb-stomped instantly. Analyzing those two characters, it becomes clear that Ahsoka likely has a greater proficiency with her technical skill, but is held back by her reverse grip that truly limits her movement. One might think that her dual blades would give Ben pause, and while it is true that he does not have any direct dueling experience with Jarkai, at least none shown, I find it unlikely that this would be a crippling weakness, due to Ben's ease with dealing with lost Tribe of the Sith members that wielded lightsabers, glass daggers, parangs, and blasters, often simultaneously. What prevents me from giving the edge to Ahsoka at the end of the day is her stop-start method that she has retained into adulthood. All but one of Ahsoka's duels have shown her fighting style to consist of a strike, then an assessment, then another strike, and another assessment. This repeats for the length of the duel, and while this proves to be incredibly effective in a battlefield scenario, it is a weakness in a lightsaber duel. While her duel with Maul may not have showcased this specific aspect to her fighting style, I find it highly likely that this was due to a director's choice to ramp up the climactic battle for the end of a series, rather than an evolution of her style, as she reverts to her old ways during her duels in Rebels. Due to these two weaknesses, Ahsoka's dueling form becomes dangerously predictable, along with the fact that her reverse grip limits her movement. Given enough time, she becomes easy to read as a book. I believe that Ben is well within the skill range necessary to last long enough against Ahsoka to see her become predictable, and becoming predictable against Ben Skywalker is a potentially deadly mistake as showcased by his body count. It is worth noting that Ahsoka's defeat in one of her most notable duels was due to her becoming predictable and getting disarmed of both of her weapons. Ben Skywalker gets a slight edge in martial arts and lightsaber dueling. As a Force wielder, Ahsoka Tano is very much part of her lineage. She possesses the natural instinct of Anakin, the precision of Obi-Wan, and the spiritual element of Yoda. She has displayed power and control exceeding that of Jedi twice her age, and her Force abilities can be directly compared with high-tier Jedi Knights. Unlike several Jedi who seem only capable of great feats in the heat of the moment, Ahsoka's performance across the Clone Wars is consistent. Her primary focus is likely physical augmentation, and her feats in agility and speed are some of the best showcasings of that power in any modern media. With telekinesis, Ahsoka clearly took note from both Anakin and Obi-Wan as she displays both power and control, giving her the edge over most of her contemporaries. The best example of this is when she casually redirected a Trandoshan's blaster, then plucked him from the ground and slammed him into a nearby tree. Trandoshans are not light beings. While only shown once, it seems that Ahsoka has developed at least a rudimentary knowledge of the saber throw, showing an ability to telekinetically manipulate an ignited lightsaber mid-flight. Despite the fact that there has been no direct explanation to Ahsoka's Force defenses, I do not believe they were particularly high. Ahsoka has been shown getting hit with almost every single Force blast sent her way, and therefore it is likely that they were a low-grade barrier at best. Lastly, it should be noted that Ahsoka is extremely proficient in the use of Force integration into combat, and has been observed doing so on numerous occasions. All in all, Ahsoka is not a combatant to be underestimated, despite her comparative inexperience and youth. Ben Skywalker was the son of the most powerful Jedi in galactic history. He was also the grandson of the most powerful Force-sensitive in galactic history. At the age of 14, Ben was already a master at Force-based physical augmentation, performing the superhuman feats of strength, speed, and acrobatics common to all Jedi. Ben's telekinetic lifting strength was already in the multi-ton range, being able to throw large boulders and cause avalanches to down enemy TIE fighters. Ben accomplished this after being stranded on Zeost for several days without proper food supply. The mere fact that he was half-starved and still managed to lift such large objects is to be commended. He was also capable of scattering groups of guards and manipulating YVH-class battle droids in the midst of combat. Ben would also showcase an ability to use the Force to assist the aim of his blaster shots, using the ability on Zeos to ward off a pack of Nexts that had been hunting him for a few nights. Ben has displayed his father's and grandfather's knack for quickly mastering Force techniques after being presented with them. While still 14, Ben mastered the art of Force disappearance, a rare power that caused someone to disappear from the Force in its entirety. Notably, once it activated, it became completely impossible to find its user in the Force by any means whatsoever. At the age of 16, Ben mastered the art of flow walking, being able to walk anywhere in the past, present, or future at will. Though Ben said he was likely to never use the power again after his first attempt, due to its somewhat unethical and emotionally scarring nature. During his battles against the Lost Tribe, Ben would showcase his ability to reliably penetrate the barriers of other Force wielders, along with telekinetically manipulating projectiles in the midst of combat, with a notable example of using a Force-hurled brick to kill a Sith opponent he was dueling. Ben would also showcase an ability to creatively use telekinesis, sabotaging a training droid by jamming its projectile gun with its own ammunition. He would also showcase an ability with the saber throw, having telekinetically manipulated his activated lightsaber to reach an ally's hand. Presumably, he could do the same with the twist of aiming to kill his opponent instead. As for his defenses, his own barriers have only been broken by opponents of equal or greater skill, though Ben has yet to show any degree of mastery in Tutaminis, and therefore is still reliant on his lightsaber to deflect blaster bolts and force light. Lastly, during his final confrontation with Abeloth, Ben drew on his full potential for the first time in his life, and managed to hit Abeloth with a force blast so powerful that it could knock a frigate out of orbit, along with presumably atomizing any being that it came into contact with, aside of course, Abeloth. While this was a unique case for Ben at the time, the mere fact that he could summon such power so young was downright incredible. All in all, Ben Skywalker's current ability in the Force can be directly compared to his father's ability as of Return of the Jedi. Ben had focused and practiced power that he uses subtly and inventively, and while he is nowhere near the most powerful of his era yet, it is clear that he will become one of the most powerful Jedi in galactic history, given time. A pure Force duel between the two would hinge on a specific factor. Can Ahsoka's precision usages of the Force overcome Ben before his raw power overwhelms her due to her lacking defenses? Going through both of their arsenals, it becomes clear that the Force duel would become a telekinetic shoving match. Their telepathy would not come into play, and neither would physical augmentation or their sensibilities. Ben's cloak ability has no combative application, neither does his flow walking ability. Additionally, neither have an ability with energy-based powers for offensive or defensive purposes, so that will not come into play. Therefore, my decision of who utilizes their Force abilities better came down to who could down the other first. Considering that Ben has proven to be just as inventive with the Force as Ahsoka, the only category left is raw power, and despite the power that Ahsoka is bringing to the table, she simply cannot compete with Ben's power, as he is simply too much. While it is highly unlikely that Ben would be able to summon his full potential on an even playing field, as most of the circumstances that caused him to draw upon it would not be present, in my opinion, it is likely that he would be able to draw on a greater fraction of it than normal if his life was directly threatened. The question that I then had to ask was whether or not Ahsoka Tano would be able to successfully incapacitate Ben before he realized how much trouble he was in and ramped up the power in a last-ditch effort to survive. The answer I have come to is that it would be unlikely that she would. Ahsoka has not displayed sufficiently lethality when it comes to Force abilities in my opinion, at least when it comes to other Force wielders. Ahsoka's abilities in combat are more oriented towards making space and disorienting her opponents in order to follow up with her lightsaber, or lightsabers. Ben, on the other hand, has shown on multiple occasions that he is as willing to cut someone down with a lightsaber as he is to launch a brick into their head like a bullet. It should be noted that I do view Ahsoka as the superior Force wielder when it comes to integrating her abilities into combat, as she does so much more fluidly. But, for the purposes of this conclusion, I am answering who would win in a Force engagement without weapons and only considering physicality to the extent it affects their Force abilities, and considering Ahsoka's aim would be to incapacitate, where Ben would aim to kill. And when Ben also has the advantage in power, the answer to me is simple. Ben Skywalker gets the edge in Force abilities. Ahsoka Tano, by the time of her adulthood, wielded two standard lightsabers with white blades. Two weapons provided her with more options for both offense and defense, though reduced her strength output. Ben Skywalker wielded a standard Jedi lightsaber with a blue blade, that was likely powered by a blue Adegan crystal. After his engagements with the Lost Tribe, Ben began carrying a small hand blaster with him, likely an Imperial-era blaster he inherited from his mother after her death. Due to his ability to use the Force to aim, and considering he was confident in shooting Vestara Kai's feet from several meters away, along with the fact that Vestar was fearful enough of his aim to use a desperate maneuver by pulling an ally into the bolt's path, it is safe to assume that his marksmanship is well above average. Due to the fact that Ben's weapon provides no advantage other than familiarity with his own handiwork, he gains no advantage in terms of his primary weapon. The blaster is an interesting addition, as he has been shown to wield a blaster in tandem with his lightsaber on several occasions, and comes with the obvious benefit of increased range. Despite this, Ben does not possess a blaster with a firing rate high enough to overwhelm Ahsoka's defenses, and while his accuracy might be impressive, it is nothing that Ahsoka couldn't deal with. As a last note, while Ben did wear lightsaber-resistant Jedi battle armor during the Battle for the Jedi Temple, he does not wear such armor normally, and therefore he will not be wearing it for this engagement. Therefore, Ahsoka Tano gets the edge in weapons and equipment. And now, the verdict. For this fight, let's say it takes place in the Jedi Temple sparring arena, with multiple loose objects of various sizes for the combatants to use. Additionally, let us assume that for the purpose of this fight, neither combatant recognizes the other, because one or both combatants recognizing each other would cause the combatants to behave much more differently than normal, and as such would not be an even playing field. Additionally, and as per usual, neither combatant will have time to prepare for the battle, and the fight will start with both combatants in full view of each other. And, because both are Jedi, we will assume that for the purposes of this engagement, that both will be vying for the kill. As a final tally for this matchup, I see the victor winning 6 times out of 10. This will be a scenario of one majority victory. Let us begin. Ahsoka stared at the young man before her. She was caught off guard by the raw power that could be felt in him. She had not felt this level of power since her last meeting with Anakin. Igniting her lightsabers, she leapt at him, blades aimed for a bisecting cleave. Ben saw the Togruta in front of him, and immediately noticed how she moved with a practiced grace. It was clear that she was no stranger to a good fight. Flashing his trademark grin, he raised his blade to meet her. In the early fight, I see no outcome in which either opponent can gain a victorious advantage. It is far too early for Ahsoka to become predictable with her dueling style, and Ben will not be showing off as intently as he would normally by getting the measure of Ahsoka before going on the offensive. Additionally, as both are primarily lightsaber duelists, there will be little if any force abilities that come into play this early. Ben was losing ground. The woman in front of him was forcing him back a step at a time. He gave himself the edge in strength, with her having the edge in acrobatics and speed. Given her Togruta traits, the best he could hope for is to match her constitution, and so a prolonged slugging match was out of the question. Ben kept up with his defensive katas, making sure to keep track of both of the white blades in order to avoid an untimely death. Ducking under a passing sweep, he felt a pain in his gut as a boot sent him to the ground. Rolling away from the lethal follow-up, he sprang to his feet and reignited his lightsaber. She was good, he realized. Really good. And if he didn't do something about it, he would die. Ahsoka continued refusing to let the boy show her how hard she was working. While she was still on the offensive, the grunt of pain when she planted him into the ground was all she had to show for it so far. Assessing his stance, she attacked once again, aiming for a weak point and pulled off, then assessed, then pulled off. By the 4th time she had done so, she witnessed a blue blade aimed for her heart thrusting forward. She managed to save herself by somersaulting over his head and launching a force push into his back that staggered him a few steps before she rushed back in. I do foresee all endings where the loser of this matchup is victorious in the mid-fight, with 4 outcomes ending here. The reason for this is that, to me, the mid-fight is where Ben and Ahsoka would start to showcase the best they have to offer. However, I believe neither would be able to overcome the other so early because of how evenly matched they are. Both are used to punching above their pay grade against opponents they usually have no right contending with, let alone overcoming. Therefore, by their very nature of their combative techniques, neither could overcome the other with greater skill so easily because both are optimized to deal with opponents with a greater skill level. This would be the time that both force abilities, along with everything else in their arsenals, begins to show themselves. Ben flipped his blade behind his back just in time to stop 2 white blades from making him have more in common with his grandfather than his clan name. Pushing off, he sent a force blast her way that sent Ahsoka skidding across the arena as he pulled out his blaster. Aiming his shots with the aid from the force, he began to fire at her. Ahsoka was taken off guard momentarily, barely getting her blades up in time to deflect the bolts. While the firing rate was nothing she couldn't handle, the accuracy was astonishing. Normally she would evade most blaster shots, but she found herself being forced to block each and every shot sent her way. Reaching out with the force, she plucked the blaster from the boy's hand and sent it flying into the grandstands. Ben scowled at the thought of the effort he would have to put into retrieving his lost blaster after the bout. Leaving at the woman, he decided to get in close and see if she could withstand the saber barrage he was about to send her way. Ahsoka let the force fill her as she quickly blocked each and every strike sent at her. The boy was skilled and used a style alien to her. It had elements of styles she had studied, but it was different, as if the style was a bad translation of the classical forms. A bad translation, she thought, but not necessarily a worse one. as she rolled out of the way of another strike. Ahsoka transitioned fluidly into an offensive sequence augmented by kicks and punches, of which at least half connected. Ahsoka felt a tingling in one of her montrals and cartwheeled out of the way in time to avoid a loose sheet of metal that would have surely decapitated her. Looking up at the boy, she saw grim determination on his face as he launched a brick at her and leapt after it. The late fight is where I see this matchup ending most times. Both Ahsoka and Ben will be battered by this point, with Ben likely taking more of the hits as he is used to tanking them, while Ahsoka prefers to evade them. Ben will likely begin to use his Force abilities more actively with his lightsaber sequences, along with physical combat when and where applicable. Ahsoka, on the other hand, would start to see herself tire. While Ben has been through marathon engagements of constant fighting and engagement, Ahsoka has not. She will begin looking to end the fight quickly, as Ben will continue to power on and she could only match him for so long. Ben was fighting for his life, using everything that he knew. A stone thrown from behind, used as misdirection, a push to create space, a lightsaber sequence aimed at holding back a saber onslaught, and a saber throw to catch the woman off guard. Ben had not felt this level of pressure in years. Feeling the searing pain of a lightsaber strike that got just a little too close to his arm, he let the force flow through him and manifest itself in a hammer blow that sent the woman into the wall behind her. Ahsoka pushed off the wall in time to avoid the decapitating blow the boy aimed at her, but was forced to block the follow-up or risk losing her leg. Using the boy's face as a launching pad, she threw herself into a backflip that gave her some space for a force blast of her own, aimed at his midsection. Launching herself after him, she was met with a one-handed block and felt his hand grab her offhand's wrist. Gasping in pain, he forced her to release the saber and he began driving her back with a series of power blows. Thinking quickly, she activated her discarded saber and called it to her hand. The boy did something unexpected. The barrel rolled over the blade and reached out with the force, adding extra speed to her saber, forcing Ahsoka to dodge out of the way instead of rearming herself. She would barely regain her footing before being forced into another blade lock with the boy. Ben began forcing the woman down, and reached out in force to bring another brick her way. The woman went into a cartwheel that Ben knew would transition into a diagonal slash, aimed at gaining some breathing room, but this time he was ready. Having seen the woman do the same maneuver several times before over the course of the engagement, and knowing that she had no second blade to take revenge, he turned his blade point down and brought it around, slicing off her sword arm at the elbow before executing a follow-up attack that cut her from hip to shoulder. Breathing heavily, Ben limped from the arena looking for the nearest med center. And thus, I declare Ben Skywalker the victor. Inspiration for this matchup came from two fronts. On a lesser note, Ahsoka and Ben were the Padawans of Anakin and Luke, and so I wanted to see how they stacked up against each other. Additionally, both Ahsoka's story began in 2008, and her original Clone Wars run ended in early 2013. Ben's story began in 2006 with the Legacy of the Force series, and for all intents and purposes ended with the last Legends novel titled Crucible in mid-2013. Had the Clone Wars continued as planned, along with what are now Legends, it is highly likely that both Ben and Ahsoka's story would have ended around the same time, if not currently ongoing. But alas, this never occurred. Watching both Ben and Ahsoka grow almost simultaneously led me to form an association between the two, furthered by the fact that by the start and end of their respective stories, they were roughly equivalent in age. Ahsoka would later be shown in Rebels as much older. Lastly, with the recent release of the Clone Wars Season 7 finale, I decided to bump up this matchup earlier than planned, as a sort of celebration. As for an explanation for why I believe Ben to be the victor, I believe that it firmly comes down to the fact that while she is a devastating battlefield operative, Ahsoka is not an effective duelist. Despite this weakness, Ahsoka continues to focus on dueling, and while she has improved in the years between the Clone Wars and Rebels, she is not up to par with the great masters. or even just masters. What makes her so deadly is the whole package of her physical combat, saber skills, and force abilities. Unfortunately, in this case, Ben has proven that he can tank the hits, along with having greater power in the force, and saber skills good enough to keep up with Ahsoka until she becomes predictable due to her weaknesses. If Ahsoka had managed to overcome this primary weakness at any point, it would be a no contest victory for her over Ben. But considering the fact that her style has remained similar throughout her appearances, and she has only improved her control, not the fundamental weakness behind her style, I see this as a weakness that Ben will have no trouble exploiting, given time. That being said, the victory condition for Ben is lasting until the late fight, and any ending to a fight before then will be a victory for Ahsoka. With that out of the way, I would like to thank you all for watching this episode of the Versus series. Keep in mind that this is all my opinion of a hypothetical matchup, and feel free to leave comments, criticisms, or suggestions for future matchups in the comments down below. This is the Phoenix Exalt, signing out, and may the Force be with you, always.